Okay, I think we're ready. So without delay, let's please give your hands, put your hands together for Kristina. And she's going to have a couple guests come up here in a little bit too. So Kristina, I'll let you take it.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristina, Vincent. Can you guys hear me okay? Yay, okay. I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you guys for inviting me to speak, and thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to talk to you about what being remote at my company means and how we learn to embrace remote culture and love remote employees. I'm going to bring up two of my coworkers over here at the end for a quick facilitated Q&A and get you guys a little bit of insight on what it feels like to be a remote employee from their perspective. So first, let's talk about my company. I work for Gannett, and you may not have heard of Gannett, but I'm sure you've heard of USA Today. But we're not just USA Today. We also have a network of 130 local media sites. So we're passionate about local journalism, and we bring a local perspective to our content. And I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the Colorado and up in Fort Collins, but they're actually one of our sites, so that's exciting. So a little bit more about me. This is actually not my first career. I started out as an accountant out in Florida, and I was doing financial analysis. Then I realized that was kind of boring and decided to be more of a data developer, got into SQL development. And when I did that, I was working 3 days a week at home and the other 2 in the office. So I started my remote journey there. Then I transitioned to working with Gannett, and now I'm fully remote 5 days a week. That's everything that I do. I have 2 little girls at home. They're just amazing. And I like getting outside and riding my bike and rock climbing, fun Colorado stuff. So a little bit more about my team. We are the API services team, and we power the content pipeline for the USA Today network. Basically what we do is we take the data from our journalists, their photos, their articles, their videos, stuff like that, and we make it highly available, performant, and scalable for our internal users. And our internal users are the ones that build things like the mobile app, or if you go to our website and try to see the news. We also syndicate some of our content out to third parties. And then the other thing that we do is not just our journalists' information, but also sports scores and election scores, things like that. So a little bit more about what our team makeup looks like. We have 18 engineers all over 11 different states, all the time zones in the US. So we have 4 people in headquarters, and they have quite a bit of flexibility. They get to work from home 3 days a week. And the rest of us are fully working from home and remote. So that means our team is 78% remote. And our other teams here at Gannett have kind of similar makeups, not the same team by team, but pretty close. And the thing I want you to take away from this is we don't just have 1 remote employee, we don't have 2, we are fully remote, so it's our entire culture. So this may be kind of scary for some of you. How in the world can we make this work? You may be worried about, will our remote employees abuse that flexibility? Will I get lonely if I'm the remote employee working from home? Will I actually get any work done? Will we accomplish anything? That's something to be worried about. But before we talk about those challenges, let's talk about the benefits of remote work. There are a ton of benefits, and we're going to start off talking about it from an employee's perspective. So for the first thing that we get excited about is there's no commute time. You don't have to spend 90 minutes of your time driving, getting into work, dealing with annoying people in the car and stuff like that. And for me particularly, I have 2 kids, so the way that I spend this time in the morning is getting them up, talking to them about their day, making them breakfast, actually spending time with them before I go to work. And when I worked in an office full time, I didn't really have this opportunity to be the best mom that I wanted to be at the same time as being a good employee. So it makes me feel like I have better work-life balance. And then of course there's some obvious benefits, like maybe you could sleep in later if you want to, or you don't have to pay for gas in your car. That's exciting. The next thing we want to talk about is flexibility. So one thing I want to mention is here at Gannett, we try to really push a flexible culture in the first place. We trust our employees and just have a culture of trust around the idea that you can get your work done. If you need something, if you need to do something during the day, like go to an appointment or run an errand, that's fine. And that we're not going to pressure you to be, in your chair at all times during the day. And we really extend that to our remote workers especially. So it makes for a great opportunity for you to maybe run errands like I was saying before, or taking care of your kids, maybe doing some cooking and things like that, go for a walk. These things are really important to having really great work-life balance as an employee. So location is really important too. You can live wherever you want to live if you're a remote employee. You're not tied down. Some of our employees have decided to travel the world, or we actually had a guy last year who his family is in Malaysia, and so he flew out there for 3 or 4 months and worked with them and got to spend time with his family. And I can imagine if you have family that's that far away, you don't get to see them very often. So that was a huge treat for him. It made him feel like a whole person in terms of where he could be and get his work done. So there's a ton of benefits for our employees, and we're really excited about that. But it's also great for our employers. So we're going to talk about those benefits here for a minute. So the biggest thing that we get out of this is our recruitment. We can recruit from anywhere in the U.S. Some companies recruit from anywhere in the whole country or the whole world. And that means that you get to choose from more quality candidates. You have a greater pool of people to choose from. And you can find like those tough to fill positions, maybe architects, principals, managers, people that have really special skills that you're looking for. You can find them everywhere throughout the US instead of just searching in one area. We find that our employees are actually more productive, which is really exciting. So part of it is just that all the benefits we already talked about for our employees. They get to control their environment. They get to have their workstation set up just the way they want. They get to have the temperature the way they want it to be. But the most important thing I think that we found with this is our incident response, especially after hours, is way faster than it could be. And the reason for that is we already have designated places to go. We have Zooms that we know that we can join. We have Slack channels that we know to converge to find information about the incident. And we can get right to work. One of our employees actually worked for a company previously that didn't have any remote workers, and they had a whole team that was dedicated to getting people together during an incident. And in this case, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to pay those people, and we don't have to waste time trying to get everyone on the same page. Okay, and then also we don't have to try to get people to relocate, which is really exciting when we're going to find a new candidate for our employee. First of all, we don't have to spend the money. We don't have to pay them for packing and unpacking. We don't have to get them out here to find a house. And then the last thing that we find that's exciting about that is that if you're trying to court a candidate, so to speak, and they have 2 offers, one where they have to uproot their entire family, change their kids' schools, change where they want to be, maybe they love Colorado, they don't really want to move to Texas, that kind of thing, and you can say, hey, we really like you, and we want you to work for us, and you can stay right where you are, you can keep your life the way it is. That might make that employee choose you over a company that wants them to move. So we talked about all these great benefits. It's really clear that this is a great idea, but there's some challenges to it, and we want to talk about that. The most important thing with remote is you have to try to mitigate these challenges in order to be successful. So let's talk about a few examples of that. The most obvious one is communication issues. You can't just walk over to someone's desk and say, hey, something's happening. You can't just throw it over the wall. You have to get a little bit more creative and figure out how to work in this kind of environment. So the one thing that we find helps is we have core availability hours from 10 to 4 Eastern. And our company is based in Virginia, so Eastern works for us. But you might adjust it to whatever makes sense for your particular company. We also use Slack, which everyone uses Slack. That's not new. We love how we can create custom emojis and really get our point across in a fun way. And we also use custom Slack integrations. So one of our Slack integrations is called PR Manager. And we actually created this internally. Basically what it does is it nags us whenever we have a pull request that's ready to go. You post it in this channel where everyone knows to look. and it posts information from Jira that says, hey, here's what you're supposed to be doing, here's what's up with that. And it reacts with little emojis when things need to be reviewed, when changes have been requested. And it's really great because you can go to one place and find out all the information that you need to know about the status of a PR. And so that we find that really helps us stay on the same page. The other thing that we do that really helps is travel. We find that travel is it's not something that you can just cut out when you're trying to cut your expenses. It really develops this culture of a team, and it really helps us develop some strong relationships. And many companies have different reasons for traveling. Either to go to a conference like we are today, maybe you're going to meet with a client, maybe you have a special initiative you need to get a team together for. Sometimes just spending time together is reason enough to travel. And so we really try to protect this, especially when we're trying to meet financial initiatives. We have to say, like, okay, I understand you're trying to do something here, but travel is not the thing to cut, and that's really important to our culture. And here's some pictures of our team hanging out in various different places, and like I said, developing those strong relationships that make a team great. And then I think the most compelling thing that we do here at Gannett is we use Zoom. And not everyone uses Zoom, but what we're doing with it is really unique. As soon as you get to work in the morning, whether you're remote or not, whether if you're in headquarters too, you jump on a Zoom and we all sit together, camera up, all day. And you may be saying, like, oh God, what if I don't want to be on camera all day? And that's definitely something that we have to deal with. But once you get used to it, it's really nice because it kind of recreates that situation where you can say, hey, Tim, I have a question. Can you help me? And I think it's really difficult to recreate that over Slack. This gives you more of a face-to-face interaction and more community than you can get otherwise. And so here's our team all together on Zoom getting ready to work. And we can even break out into smaller sessions if we need to discuss really important things, like our red velvet Oreo here. That was really exciting. So the other thing we got to worry about here is our productivity. Are people going to slack off during the day? Are they going to get distracted by, oh, I got to do laundry, or I got to cook dinner, maybe my kids are running around? And then the one thing that we hear about a lot is how if you're remote, you get excluded from that meeting. No one told me this was happening. I wasn't there. Or just feeling like, okay, well, people at headquarters are having a pizza party. I don't get any pizza. What in the world, And so we found a few solutions that help with this. First of all, when we first talked to a candidate before joining our team, we talked to them about some of this stuff. Would you be willing to be camera up all day like we do? Are you willing to be accountable to yourself and to hold yourself responsible for what we need to get done during the day? And then we also focus all of our culture on remote. It's not just kind of an afterthought, it's everything that we do. So all of our meetings are held on Zoom, they are notified in Slack, so everyone can come together in a remote way. And it's not just our devs that are remote. It's our principals, it's our managers, it's even our directors. So that makes it really easy to force ourselves to work hard to make remote work, because it's not just one or two people, it's everyone. And then we found that if we have kind of a learning session during the day, like a lunch and learn kind of thing, we expense people's lunch. Maybe we all decide to get pizza that day, maybe we don't, but it's a lot of fun. It makes us all feel like appreciated and like we can work together successfully. So one last thing that we have to deal with sometimes is technical issues. Sometimes your laptop's not feeling it that day, your keyboard doesn't work, your monitor goes out, things like that. And many times you can walk over to your IT department and say, hey, I know you guys have a closet full of stuff, help me out. Well, that's not really feasible if you're remote. And so we have our headquarters IT staff there in Virginia. They know how to help us with software issues, and they know where to point us if we have a problem with a actual device that we need help with. And then if it really comes down to it, we are a big network. It's not just people in Virginia. We have the Coloradan a couple hours away that we could go to if we really had a problem. We have access to our network, so that's really exciting. All right, so in conclusion, remote is not easy, but if you can design this culture around communication and trust, then it's well worth all the benefits. And now I'm going to bring up my coworkers, Andy Horner and Tim Kuhlman, and we're going to do a little Q&A just to get an idea more what it's like to be remote. Okay, so first off, Andy, will you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, I'm Andy Horner. I've been working at the USA Data Network for about 4 years now. I first started in an office in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Cincinnati Enquirer. For about 2 years, I was in an office every day. We slowly transitioned to like a work from home Wednesday type deal, you know, one day a week. And then after 2 years, I moved to Colorado and became fully remote on the API services team.
And Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim Kuhlman. I have worked with USA Today Network for about 2 years, worked from home for about 4, and done various dev and ops roles throughout the industry in the last 15 plus years or so.
Awesome. So Tim, how do you avoid working all the time?
So without a commute, you don't kind of have that built-in time to mentally transition from kind of like work mode to rest of life mode. So I really find that I'm a creature of habit, and so building in some habits that kind of replace that mental shift of the commute really helped me out a lot. A few things I do. One, I have set hours, right? So having set hours, it doesn't mean I can't have flexibility within it, but just like if I was going to an office, I generally show up at the same time, and you know, if I have to take time out for something, I try to make it up some other time. I keep those kind of set hours all the time, also at home. I do get ready in the morning, right? Get ready, get dressed. You know, camera up obviously makes a difference with that, but even without that, I think it's helpful to kind of like be ready in the morning and kind of go through that routine. And probably the other really big thing I do is I have a set location where I work. So I always have the same desk. That's where I work from. That helps me kind of mentally be in work mode. If I'm doing something on my computer that isn't work, I tend to unplug it, you know, go to a different part of the house, and that just helps with that mental transition.
And Tim, how do you avoid getting distracted?
Yeah, so I think that transition into going into kind of this work mode or not helps me to focus when I'm at work, as well as with the flip side of it, helps me to avoid you know, feeling like I'm working all the time. And having that set location, I think, is a really key point of that. Is that's where I am, that's where I can focus. That's
Awesome. And I know you have 4 kids. How do you keep them from driving you crazy and bugging you during the day?
Yeah, 4 kids, often at home much of the time. So I think the key thing here is that you just be boring. And so the kids don't want to come bug you. That comes fairly naturally, so that one maybe is harder for some of you guys. But beyond that, I'm going to go back to having that set workspace. My kids know, you know, if I'm there working at my desk, that I'm working, they can come ask questions, but I'm not going to stop and play a game with them. You know, I'm not going to do anything that's going to take a long time. And actually, surprising as it is, I've found that I get fewer interruptions from my family than I did in an office from coworkers. It's just, you know, they come in, they interrupt every once in a while, but it's not that big a deal compared to being in an office and listening to the manager sit next to you like on the phone all the time.
All right, Andy, how did you feel when you went remote for the first time?
So it was a little bit of a challenge. Having the 1 day a week work from home thing sort of slowly transitioned me into that. Being camera up on Zoom was definitely a little bit of, took some adjustment, I would say. One of the things I really enjoy from working from home is that in the office you have, like Tim said, all sorts of distractions, right? If somebody wants to bug you, they'll come up, tap on your shoulder. A lot of people don't respect the headphones in rule, which I'm sure you guys are all aware of. So being able to sort of like snooze my notifications on Slack is really useful. If I need 20 minutes to finish what I'm working on, get my thoughts in order, then I can sort of come back to that afterwards.
And do you do something special with your workspace to maximize productivity?
So I think Tim really touched on this. Having a good routine is helpful. You know, being on work at the same time every day when you don't commute into an office is really important. You know, I've got my IKEA desk with 3 monitors and adjustable stands and gigabit fiber internet and everything, which is amazing. And I have my own dedicated office in the house. it's got a door and everything. I can close it if I'm trying to get away from the distractions. And I feel like that actually helps me focus better than being in an office workspace.
So what about when you get out of the house? Do you go to coffee shops and things like that?
Yeah, so I do go a little stir crazy, sitting at home, Monday through Friday every week. I try to get out of the house on the weekends. Coffee shops are really nice. There's a couple hacker spaces here in Denver that have like days where you can go work from the hacker space, or a bunch of coffee shops within walking distance from my house. Occasionally I will go to a park and tether my phone and work from there. It's kind of a cool option.
Back to Tim, can you talk about some bad remote work experiences if you had?
Yeah, I imagine many people have felt the kind of the remote workers who don't seem connected. I was once in an office, but we had a few remote workers, and I really felt like we did a great job in the office of trying to include those remote workers. Every time we had a conversation, we'd try to get them in, but nevertheless, it still wasn't enough. They would still often get the conclusion of the discussion and not actually be involved and things like that. I've also kind of worked at the extreme other end, where instead of camera up, there's really very little communication with the team. When you have that going on, you just don't feel connected to your team. You don't feel like you work with them as well. Communication doesn't happen on things the way it should. Things are days late because someone forgot to mention something. So I really think that the first thing to really worry about when you're working with remote culture is how do we communicate well.
Awesome. And Tim, how do you stay active when you're working from home?
Yeah, that's a good question. Though I'm mostly working from my desk, I do get stir crazy at times too. I actually make it a habit to every lunch get out. So I usually just walk around my neighborhood, but I get out for that walk, get out for kind of that mental refresh away from that desk. And I try to do that all the time. I also, just with the flexibility, there's days I can get out and run. During the winter, I tend to run during lunchtime instead of a walk that day. Maybe in the summer, I'll try to do that in the morning and start a little bit later. But being right there at home, I have to be intentional about getting out. But I also have the full freedom to do it any way I feel like.
All right, Andy, how do you feel? Do you get lonely when you're at home, and how do you avoid that?
Yeah, so sort of touching on what I said earlier, I have a roommate, and she is home occasionally. It's not quite the same as like that face-to-face interaction. When you're in an office, you get stuff like lunch with your coworkers a couple days a week, or happy hours, sort of those sort of things. You can have this like nice work-life balance and communication and develop relationships. It's a little bit harder when you're remote. So I will say I am our #1 Slack poster at work. I have over 100,000 messages sent. I love that title.
Yes.
I find that it's a different atmosphere, sort of communicating with your teammates over this. You do develop those relationships. They're just different, Chrissy was talking about being able to travel is something that's really important. Get that face-to-face time with your employees. It's something we do a couple times a year, but it's not quite the same. So for me, getting out of the house, going to coffee shops, trying to get that like human interaction that we all crave is still really important on the weekends and sometimes during the work week.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Do you guys have any questions for us? Oh, also would mention that we're hiring, and that we, from time to time, write blogs about our culture and also our technology, and you can check that out on our website.
Okay. So would you guys say there's more pitfalls to having the hybrid? Some people remote, some people in the office environment. Like, would you say that fully remote is preferred to that, or other ways to sort of mitigate that those pitfalls there?
Yeah, I would definitely say that in my experience, it is a lot harder to do the hybrid, part remote, part in the office, especially on a single team. When everyone's remote, everyone communicates the remote ways, right? When everyone isn't, we're humans. If someone's standing next to us, we just talk to them, right? So it's hard to kind of say, hey, let's get on a Zoom when you're standing next to me, so other people can be involved. It just doesn't work. So there's much more challenges of that.
Yeah, when I was working in an office but with distributed people, we would always forget to invite people to meetings, or we would have one face to face with most of the people there in the office, but the guy that was not there wouldn't get to participate, and that's not really ideal.
I feel like it also helps that our remote culture is driven from the top down. So our director and our manager, our team lead are both remote as well. So they're sort of promoting that culture from within. And so, it helps when everyone is remote.
Absolutely.
More questions? Cool.
In your opinion, do you think that working remotely can inhibit advancement opportunities in a workplace that's kind of hybrid? And how do you suggest navigating that?
You got this?
So we do monthly one-on-ones with our manager where it's, as it implies, one-on-one, and we hop on a video session and we talk for half an hour. Our team lead, he fosters this environment of, anytime you got a problem or a concern, you can come talk to me. So if I said tomorrow, hey, I feel like I need to be in this role that's higher than where I'm at, please help me get there, he would, help me take the steps to get to there, and the team would sort of foster that.
So I would just add, that is that remote first culture with management and that being key. If it is a hybrid role, it's hard to say. I mean, it's going to really depend on what the company and who's supporting it. But I would generally expect that if your upper management is really bought into the idea of remote, then maybe it's not. But otherwise, maybe it does cause trouble.
I would say this kind of goes back to negotiation tactics and trying to prove your worth, saying, here's what I've accomplished and what I've done for this past such and such period of time. Even as a remote employee, you're still contributing, you're still working really hard, and if you can show that to your manager, I would hope that they would accept you for a promotion.
One more question over here.
So I work in a 100% remote team, but then as we've gotten bigger, we find that there's more like wildflowers and people that aren't participating. So in that, 14 cameras up or however you guys do it, how do you deal with the fact that there's so many people and there's less engagement there?
So I think the organization as a whole has quite a few different teams that each have their own Zoom that you can go into. You can go to their Slack channel, and usually it's posted right in the subject of what their Zoom is. And so that team is kind of hanging out there, which usually I think keeps it smaller. And so each team has that kind of their own team communication. And then when you're looking to talk to another team, you may hop off your Zoom and go to their Zoom. But at some point, I guess what I'm saying is you got to break it up into kind of more manageable chunks. I'd agree. If it was 30 people on the Zoom, it wouldn't be that useful.
So one thing I've noticed is that during some of the meetings we have, we can break off into individual rooms for our conferencing software. We can get into these situations where people are trying to talk all over each other and someone's interrupting someone else, and this just chain. And we kind of feel like the ideal size for a meeting is maybe 8 to 10 people, and you start getting past that, you start getting these interruptions. There's still like a little bit of latency there in, you speak and then you hear someone else speaking and they have to wait for you to finish speaking, and there's some techniques to deal with that, but sometimes it can be a little frustrating.
And to be clear, when we're all on the Zoom together, like we are day to day, there's not a lot of conversation happening. Like we mess around sometimes and have some fun, but it's not a meeting all the time. It's usually just people being available in case you have a question or in case you need to say something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that we haven't actually mentioned, that most of the time we're muted. So
yeah.
Even though your screen on, it's quieter than an office. If someone's talking to their kid or whatever, you're not hearing that. So since you can just unmute whenever you want to actually talk to the team, most people just stay muted all the time. It's fairly silent and very easy to kind of concentrate if you're working on something that needs a lot of thought.
We spoke about our Slack integrations earlier, and one of the really cool ones that I've recently found out is we have a Zoom integration for Slack. So Zoom is this conferencing software that we showed earlier. We can get like 75 participants on a screen at once in a room. And with this Slack integration, you can type /Zoom, and it will generate a unique room that you and the other people in that either Slack channel or DM can click on, and you immediately transported into this room where it's just you guys. It's ephemeral, and then it closes back down afterwards. So it really lowers that bar of entry into getting into that face-to-face conversation with people.
Great questions. Any more?
So we have half of our company is remote now, and one of the things that we've ran into is the idea of stand-ups. Like we have issues because we have different time zones, and I noticed that you guys had up on one of your slides that you have specific 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern time. Does that really work? Because it seems like certain people would be up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and how do you guys facilitate that?
So yeah, we built in quite a bit of flexibility into those core hours, and we make them 10 to 4 Eastern. So like at 10 o'clock is 8 a.m. here. We have one guy that's in California that happens to be 7 a.m. for him. But he doesn't have any kids, so it's not a big deal. He just kind of gets up and does his day, you know. I do have 2 kiddos, and the great thing about our culture and our culture of flexibility is that I take my kids to school, I get in at 11, and that's not a big deal because I still get my work done, I stay a little bit later, and I'm available in case there's something that comes up. So we do build a little bit of flexibility there.
That's 11 Eastern, 9:15 our time. So we do have daily stand-ups on the Zoom. We run our stand-ups at 9:15 Mountain Time, 11:15 Eastern, and we find that that's a pretty good like balance between it's morning for most people, it's before lunch for everybody. The East Coast folks get a little bit of time to work on some stuff. I personally get on at 8 o'clock Mountain Time, and then that gives me an hour to sort of rack my brain, figure out what I was working on, check my tickets from the previous day or previous week.
Yeah, that's definitely an adjustment trying to figure out like Mountain Time versus Eastern Time and trying to keep that all straight in your head. So sorry if I confused anyone just there.
Outlook is really good about handling the time zones for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Awesome.
Any other last minute ones? We got one over here.
So how do you guys handle the onboarding process and recruitment interviews and that sort of thing?
So I think most often whoever's being onboarded flies out somewhere to wherever their manager feels like meeting them, basically. And so there usually is a going to like either the corporate office or some other office and kind of spending a week with them and onboarding them there. And then from then on out, it's remote.
Yeah, we like to bring the team together when someone joins and have like 5 or 6, 10, as many people as we can like as many people as makes sense. Bring them together. That way you get to build some kind of face-to-face relationships and some feelings like, hey, when I reach out to Andy, I kind of know him a little bit. I've had a beer with him, and so I feel comfortable asking him a question.
You asked about interviewing. So all of our candidates are interviewed over Zoom unless they are in the area of an office where a hiring manager lives. Kristy sort of talked about our hiring pool being expanded because we are remote. So is the expectation that those employees will be able to hop on a Zoom, interview candidates will be able to hop on a Zoom, talk over some problems with us, and it tends to work pretty well. I've done, maybe 15 interviews, and they all seem to go pretty smoothly. Zoom's a great piece of software. Free plug for them if they're here.
Well, we'll get it on the recording.
Yeah, do that.
Right, so at my work, we have a 2-day work from home policy. And anyway, where am I going with this? So like we have the Google chat, so we know when somebody's kind of online or whatever, active. What are your thoughts on that? One, I could see where it could kind of give you accountability to make sure you're disciplined in being online. And 2, it could also give your managers that are skeptical about making sure you're online. I guess, what are your thoughts about something like that kind of shows that you're kind of online or not?
So Slack has the active notifications, little green light beside your name. Occasionally we'll use those. Most everybody's online the whole day. We're very straightforward with our managers and stuff. Hey, we got to run somewhere. I'll be back in 30 minutes. I got to run an errand, got an appointment, that kind of thing. If you're out of the house and they ping you on Slack, say, hey, I'm not home at the minute. Give me 10 minutes. I'll be home. it's really not been an issue from my perspective. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Well, I would say our management isn't worried about the exact hours we're there. They're worried about the work we do, which I know not everyone has that freedom, but that to me is the right solution. Though Slack has that, there's times I forget to change status. There's lots of things that happen that's not necessarily even accurate, but I don't think anyone really cares. If you're doing your job, if you're there when people schedule meetings and stuff, it's fine.
And then the culture of trust is really important here. I kind of think if your manager is watching to see if you're online or not, then they must not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the bottom line here is communicate. Like Andy said, if you have somewhere to be, if you have an appointment, if your kid needs something, let your team know and when you'll be back, and that usually goes over pretty smooth.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, let's put your hands together for Kristina, Andy, and Tim. Thank you so much.